MorningLine, our guest with us this morning, Jim Shulman, the Metro Vice Mayor. Metro Council meeting tonight. We've touched bases on broken pipes at Bridgestone, the stadium deal. There's some others. Yeah, we were talking about this. How many of you have pet cats and dogs? How many of you feed a cat in your neighborhood that's a feral cat? Maybe all the neighbors pitch in as well. And it seems to me, Jim, that she's done this before, but Councilman Stiles, Joyce Stiles, is proposing something to address issues of roaming dogs and dog bites and cats. What do you think? It's going to come up tonight?
It's coming up on second reading tonight. There was a debate on the bill when it came up on first reading to try to schedule a public hearing on the bill so people who are concerned about the legislation can come talk. That didn't happen at that meeting, but we're getting a lot of emails on this bill, because obviously people have a lot of pets and they want to know what's going on. I think it was the American Kennel Association weighed in and said they're not comfortable with the bill. A number of people are saying we need to have a public hearing on the bill to talk about it. It's getting into some specifics, and what I'm hearing is that there's concerns about some of the language. You know, how do you classify a dog as a dangerous dog 1 or 2? There's questions about vaccinations, there's questions about insurance requirements and other things like that.
Yeah, kind of requiring, you know, if your dog bites someone or there's a dog attack, you have to have a dangerous dog sign up, liability insurance, maybe mandating training to manage the dog's behavior for an owner. Now, again, I guess at the heart of this, it's well-meaning. You want to make sure people take responsibility for their animals and they don't bite people.
That's right.
So, I don't know if right now the way things are set up is adequate or not. I mean, there's dog bites, but Metro Animal Control will respond sometimes. Law enforcement can in some cases. What do you think?
Well, so, I mean, things like this have come up before. You obviously do not, you want pet owners to be responsible for their pets. And there are dogs, and I'm not sure if there's how many vicious cats out there that can do serious damage, but there are dangerous dogs out there that need to be pinned up and need to be kept away from small children and other people, and even adults. But one of the questions I think that people are having about this is this on the right track? Has it gone too far? Are there too many definitions? Who's going to go out and try to figure out if a dog is dangerous 1 or 2, and who's going to make sure that people comply with it? We'll see what happens tonight. You know, either she tries to push the bill through, or it gets deferred, or people call for a public hearing. I know there's a lot of people who want some input on this thing. Okay, and the other part of it is the feral cat, which just has me kind of scratching my head. It's kind of focuses on feral cats, kind of defining what a feral cat would be, and we can talk about that. And a community cat can be cared for by more than one home. The laws against abandonment wouldn't apply to the caregiver of the animal, because I guess who's the caregiver? If it's a whole neighborhood, is that animal abandoned, or is a community? And again, there are some communities where they say, please trap them so that they can try to be put somewhere, or at least get fixed so they don't continue breeding. But, you know, feeding feral cats, you see a cat starving, you want to help it. Well, that's a tough one, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, what do you, I don't know. I don't know. I think that's why I think a number of people want to have some additional input on this thing if we're going to pass something like this, to make sure that we've got it correct. And there are so many good-hearted people in Nashville that care for animals. And if a feral cat is being fed by a number of different people, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you want animals not to starve, and you want them to be protected.
The homeless issue, it looks like movement's going to happen finally.
On homelessness overall, I know once we passed the $50 million that the mayor had requested through the federal funds, we put together a group of council members headed up by Tom Druffel, a council member, to keep an eye on that money to make sure that it was spent in accordance with the plan and that it starts getting out. It sounds like the first encampment that's going to be addressed is Brookmead Park.
Yeah, exactly. So the question now, and we've all reported Brookmead, the situation there now, telling them there's going to be a time and there's going to be an issue for where they can go. What happens for the people who say, I'm not going? How do you think that will be handled at Brookmead?
Well, that's more of a security issue that's going to have to be addressed.
Is that something where law enforcement would have to go in and say, well, now we have to get you out of here, we're going to move your stuff out of here? Hopefully we'll be giving them options, right, is the idea, is say, look, we have to clean up this park. There was a story, was it a couple weeks ago, where there was a couple at some point had been at Brookmead with a small child who ended up dying. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. Now, the circumstances, we don't think that the child had still been at the Brookmead encampment, may have been in another location when the child finally died, and we don't know the issues of why exactly. That's still being investigated. But that was very disturbing for people. There were some pictures that surfaced of this couple with the child, homeless, over there, and that child ended up dying. Yeah. Heartbreaking. So how do we handle this now that they're being told they're going to have to move from this place if they don't go? You said it's law enforcement? I mean, they may just say, okay, fine, but we're not going.
Well, so there has to be a plan, and that's what they've been working on this for a while. You have to make sure that everybody has proper notice, and there's signs being posted and things like that to say, okay, you know, the car's going to be cleaned out at a certain time. And I've always thought that they're going to have to do it kind of in stages. There are going to be some people that have wanted to go. They want to go into a more permanent, either temporary shelter and then hopefully
into more something permanent. And where do you think those will be, the temporary shelter?
They've got different places set up. Okay. So they're going to move those folks in. The second group may be a little bit more of a challenge. But then there's going to be some people that just don't want to go. That's their home. That's where they want to go. Well, again, I think the concern is that, or the concern that's always been there, is that this is a public park that belongs to the public. That's what it's supposed to be used for. That's what the land was granted to the Metro to be used for. And so you've eventually got to get everybody out. You know, I know there's been stories in the past about people having weapons in there and so forth. So I think everybody just has to be careful. It has to be played out over time and it has to be done carefully. But I think the other idea is that when people have to be given the chance to go someplace where they have shelter, and they are going to be, you know, with additional wraparound services, and then hopefully enter into something more permanent in terms of someplace where they can live. But eventually, I think the understanding was that the park is a park and has to be.
No, and you understand why it has to be addressed that way. You know, I've been out there a few times, and when I've talked to individuals who were out there, the ones I spoke with, I think, are going to be open to the idea of being moved if they have someplace better to go. There are going to be some who are going to be just either they're not going to trust or want to, but I think most of them will. And that's really what it comes down to. I think we all sympathize with those who are homeless, but when you have a place like this and some of the crime that comes out of it, or, you know, gosh forbid, with that child, with what happened to him or her, it has to be addressed, right? You can't just take it over, right? Because frankly, going into that encampment sometimes, I didn't fully feel safe when I went down there.
I've been in the encampment several times, and it's
depending on when you go.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't go in the evening. I've been out there during the day, but even so, I mean, it's a park. There's places all over with lots of woods and trees and things like that, and so you don't necessarily know what's going on or whether you may stumble and disturb somebody. It's a situation that needs to be properly addressed. And properly addressed from the standpoint that we have, you know, individuals. We have people in there, and they are people, and we need to respect that, and we need to be careful, and we need to provide help and assistance when necessary to folks.
And it's that $50 million, right? This is where it starts. And so Brookmead will be one of the first ones.
Yeah, so it's about encampments. And Nick, I think the last time I heard, we have over 150 encampments in Nashville.
That we know of.
That we know of. So we have to start addressing that in the proper way. You can't just, you know, you can't just clean them out and think that people are going to be able to find some place to live. We have to do it in a respectful manner, and we have to do it in a proper manner.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I did some stories along the banks of the Cumberland on either side, and if you walk down there, I was doing something on pollutants and garbage and solid waste dumped, and as you walk along there, and we were getting video of the solid waste that's just accumulated over time, you see in camp, I mean, it's along the banks of the Cumberland there, and you know, there's structures, and they're put together with plywood and boxes and tarps. And
it's amazing what's, I went out a couple of times with Open Table Nashville, canvassing during the cold weather to try to get people to come inside. And there are people who live in all kinds of different places. And somehow they have managed to do it, and somehow they managed to try to stay warm during this stuff. We have to properly address it and give people a a place to go where it's safe and it's warm and it's a place where they can live with a roof over their head.
Yeah, I drive in every morning around 4 o'clock, and I get off the interstate and come under, I think I'm going across Memorial, and I come under the interstate, and most mornings there's a fella that's asleep under there with his dog. And this morning I saw him, and it was warmer today, even though it's raining. But I just think about, the temperatures as they drop, or when it's really hot in the summer or whatever, and I don't know. I want to stop and help him. I can't on my way in, but I mean, not that he would accept it. I just don't know. What do? You see that, and it's just tough.
I think
we've seen it for years.
I think what you have to do is you have to address the situation, just like other cities have done. Houston, for example, Milwaukee, these other cities are trying to figure out ways to do it. You bring in those folks that have some expertise in that, which is what we've done, and you try to come up with an overall plan. But you have to address this as the fact that we have people living outside.
And I would think most of the experts will tell you the vast majority of them are either dealing with substance abuse or have some form of mental illness. There are certainly many homeless people that just had some bad things happen all of a sudden. And how many of us are just one paycheck away from maybe being evicted from a home? That can happen. So it's just a mixed bag. So anyway, I wanted to ask about that because Brookmead looks like it's going to be the first. And I just hope it goes as smoothly as can be possible.
I think everybody wants it to go well. And I know that, there's...
Do we know how many live out there, we gotta guess?
At one point I heard the number was over 80. Now I think it's around 40. But again, everybody's an individual. And I think you made a very good point, and that's why having a plan and having the proper wraparound services, you can't take an individual that may have a history of substance abuse and then say, here, go live in this house, good luck. You can't do that because whatever issues that follows the individual, we need to try to be of assistance and help, because we want them to be successful. We want them to be able to stay in that house or whatever it is, an apartment. And so you have to do it properly and with the right services in order to make it work.
Every year we at Thanksgiving, and we try to do it year round, but we support what happens at the Mission. And you see the people that come through there. And when you're serving meals at the Mission, you really do see a cross-section, because they can come from everywhere. They don't necessarily have to be staying at the Mission, right? You've been over there. You've served.
I was serving last time, and I don't think you were there.
I was out of town. This is the first year probably in couple of decades I wasn't able to make it this year, but you know what I mean? I'm always observing the individuals coming through, and they're so happy to be there and thankful for it, and it's a mixed bag. I mean, clearly there's some folks came in there that just had a couple of bad breaks and have all of a sudden found themselves homeless. And then there's others you can tell that maybe have come from Brookmead and have been making a living homeless for years.
Well, I mean, it's very expensive to live here. And not only, if your credit is bad, you have to be able to not only pay a rent, you may have to pay a month or two rent. Then you got to pay a deposit. Then you got to get your electricity turned on. And if you've got a bad history of that, you may have to pay an extra fee. How are you going to pull that off?
Can't. We just, earlier this week, we had, or last week, guests on that have a program set up for veterans that are going through that issue, that are homeless. And part of the program is exactly what you just said.
That's it.
You need help paying that first and last month rent or getting the utilities. The money, it's just not that 1 month's rent. It's so expensive to settle in, and forget about buying something. Listen, we'll take a break on that note when we come back. Final segment with our guest, Jim Shulman. If you have a question or comment, 737-7587, back right after this.